Good afternoon. I want to welcome everyone to part two of our series on termite biology and control. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping rules. For everyone, I want you to please mute your line if you haven't done so already, and I've tried to take care of that on the back end, but if you become unmuted, please mute yourself. You can use the chat box to ask any questions. For any additional questions not answered during the webinar, you can email education@nola.gov, and this webinar will be posted at our website at www.nola.gov/mosquito and also on our YouTube channel. Today's topics is inspections and conducive conditions. Thorough termite inspections and an understanding of the conditions around your home that are conducive to termite attack allows homeowners to find and prevent termite infestations of their property. Today we have two speakers. We have Dr. Carrie Catone and Ed Freitag. Dr. Carrie Catone has been employed by the City of New Orleans Mosquito and Termite Control Board for the past 15 years. She received her PhD in entomology in 2011 as a distance education student at the University of Florida. Her research focused on survival mechanisms of Formosan subterranean termite colonies during times of prolonged flooding. Her current job duties include managing our termite control division and working with collaborators to test new products and formulations for termite treatments. Ed Freitag graduated in 1986 with a master's degree in entomology from the University of Wyoming. After working 1 year as a research associate in the entomology department at the Louisiana State University, researching bark beetle control, he joined the New Orleans Mosquito Control Board in 1987. From 1993 to 1996, he worked in a private toxicology laboratory in Matawan, Michigan, conducting inhalation toxicology research with rats, mice, and primates. In early 1996, he resumed the field operations supervisor position with the New Orleans Mosquito, Termite, and Rodent Control Board, conducting termite field trials with liquid termiticides and bait systems. He is currently a research entomologist and assists with termite research operations with chemical manufacturers, universities, and federal agencies to test chemicals for the control of Formosan, native subterranean, and drywood termites. He is also involved in the testing and use of innovative technologies for the detection of termites and structure in trees. Ed Freitag is also an award-winning photographer and specializes in macro photography of insects. And now Carrie and Ed Freitag.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I think I may be having some technical difficulties here. Oh, never mind. Okay. Um, Thank you so much for that introduction, Astacia. I really appreciate that. So today we are going to be reviewing some of our termite identification that we had started going over a couple weeks ago during part one. We are going to be discussing the importance of an inspection, as well as signs of infestation that you can look for yourself. We are going to be talking pretty in depth about our own inspection methods and tools that we use in the field, as well as how to identify insect pests by the damage that they leave behind. We're also going to do a pretty big portion of conducive conditions of termite attack. Okay, so proper identification of pests is so important in the field of pest control. So during an inspection, if you find live insects, you really want to make sure that they are identified properly. And this is primarily because, different insects are treated in different ways. Some may require fumigation, while others you could use a bait or a liquid treatment. So just to review our local termites that we have here in Louisiana. So here we deal with subterranean termites and drywood termites. So we have 4 species of drywood termites. Those are in the family Termitidae. And we have 5 species of subterranean termites in the family Rhinotermitidae. This group also includes our introduced invasive Formosan subterranean termite. So within our group of subterranean termites, we have our introduced Formosan colonies. This is the species Coptotermes formosanus. And we also have our native termites, our native subs, all in the genus Reticulatermes. So there are some pretty big fundamental differences between these two groups of subterranean termites. First of all, Formosan colonies, they can get much larger with the number of termites within those colonies. So you could have a Formosan colony that has millions of termites in it, whereas our natives could get up to maybe 600,000 termites within that colony. The Formosan subterranean termites also have a higher proportion of soldiers within that colony. So you'll have 10% of termites within that colony could be soldiers, whereas with our native colonies, you might have just 1%. The soldiers are actually pretty aggressive in Formosan colonies as well. They are really well known to really come out swinging if you disturb their nest or break open a mud tube. And they actually also will secrete this white fluid from uh, their forehead area through something called a fontanelle. And that is used to immobilize whatever is trying to attack them, whether it be, ants is a primary example here. But that is their defense mechanism for their colony. The swarming times of the day are quite different. So Formosans will swarm in the evenings from April to July, whereas our native colonies, they'll swarm during the day from January to April. Formosan colonies also are capable of forming aerial nests, which have no contact with the soil below ground. But as long as they have enough moisture and a good enough food source, they won't need that contact with the soil. So some morphological differences between our local termites here in Louisiana when dealing with subterranean termites. To do any kind of identification with termites, it's always best to either have a soldier or one of the reproductives, okay, the swarmers. And that's really because a lot of the termite workers across species will look very similar. So if you ever are trying to identify a termite species, you always want to find either a worker or an alate, one of the reproductives. So you can see here on the left, the Formosan subterranean termite has this really distinct teardrop-shaped head with these very sharp, slender mandibles. Whereas within our native colonies, the Reticulatermes, you will see this rectangular shaped head with blunt, much thicker mandibles. And when we look at the alates of Formosan subterranean termites, okay, again, these are the termite colony reproductive caste. A lot of people know them as swarmers. If you look at their wings under a microscope, you are going to see those wings covered with millions of hairs, just like you can see here. Okay, so it is very important to know the difference between subterranean and drywood termites because they are controlled using very different methods. Okay, in a couple more weeks, we are going to be doing a deep dive into control methods. But for now, we're just going to review some identification. Okay, so subterranean colonies, these are the ones that will nest in the soil, just as the name implies, within trees, inside lumber. They need a constant moisture source. Okay, so because they will nest underground, as the name subterranean implies, their foraging territories can be much larger than those of drywood colonies, which means that their colonies can be larger. Okay, so drywood colonies will live entirely within the food that they're feeding on, so they're not going to have any kind of contact with the soil. They get all the moisture they need from the wood that they're feeding on, humidity in the air, and their own metabolism. So because they are limited in their foraging space, you will see that their colonies are actually much smaller than subterranean colonies. And there are some pretty big morphological differences when you look at drywood termites and subterranean termites. So when we look at the soldiers, you will see that a drywood soldier has these very large mandibles with these marginal teeth along the inside edge of those. We're not going to see those with subterranean termites. You will also notice that the soldier, a drywood soldier, is going to have a much larger pronotum. So that is the plate-like structure. It's very analogous to the neck area of a termite. And on a drywood soldier, it's going to be as wide as the width of the head. Whereas in a subterranean soldier, you're going to see a much narrower pronotum. So it's going to be more narrow than the width of the head. However, some drywood species don't have a soldier cast with these very large mandibles with these teeth. Okay, so we have a Cryptotermes here that has a very hard sclerotized head with very, very small mandibles. And you may be wondering, how on earth does that soldier defend the colony? Well, actually, its head is hard enough that it can actually protect the rest of the colony by blocking entrances inside the gallery system if there are ants or other predators trying to invade their gallery system. So it's actually, they can physically exclude whatever predators are trying to get to the colony. So when we look at the alates of drywood termites and Formosan subterranean termites, even though they are very similar in color, there are some pretty big differences when looking at the swarmers. Okay, so again, if we look at the pronotum area, the neck area right behind the head, there you can see on the left that the drywood alate has a much wider pronotum than that of the subterranean termite, than that of the Formosan alate. The drywood alate will not have any hairs on the wings like we've already seen with Formosan subterranean termites. And drywood termites have something called cross veins on their wings as well. And these cross veins, as you can see in this picture here, they look like little vertical hash marks along the top of the wing. Okay, we're not going to see those with subterranean termites. So between the top two veins of an alate wing in a drywood termite species, you will see those cross veins. So why is a termite inspection important? Let's jump right in. Your home is the most important investment you will make in your life. Okay, termites will feed on anything containing cellulose, so anything containing wood, anything containing paper. So that's not just the lumber that a house is built out of. That can be the paper backing on sheetrock. That can be furniture inside the home. It can be wood floors and so on. And all of that termite damage, it's not going to be covered by your homeowner's insurance. And the termite business is a billion-dollar industry. We talked a little bit about this last time. These are some estimated annual costs of termite infestation treatments, repair of damage, and that's for both remedial treatments and preventative treatments as well. So nationwide, it is a billion-dollar business. So one thing that we see with our termites here in Louisiana is that they are very different from other termite species that you can see throughout the rest of the world, right? So in some places like Africa, Australia, even the tropics, you get these mound building termites. We saw this during the last webinar. So we have other termite species around the world that build these very noticeable, conspicuous above ground mounds. Okay, we don't get the luxury of that in Louisiana, right? So our termites like to stay hidden. They are a very cryptic species, so they like to conceal themselves. They like to stay hidden. And many times, by the time you can notice an infestation, damage has been done. Okay, so take example, the drywood termites. So these guys, again, live within the wood that they're feeding on, and they usually go unnoticed until these little piles of frass will appear below a little pinhole, either in a wall or a piece of furniture and so on. So they pack their galleries full of their frass, which is their excrement. And every once in a while, they have to clean house. So they will create a little pinhole, kick out hole As you can see in this picture here, they will create this kick-out hole and clean house and get rid of a lot of frass in their gallery systems. Subterranean termites, as we've said before, they will nest under the soil, within trees, and inside structures. They can have satellite nests, so it's not just a single nest. Formosan colonies can create carton material that they make nests out of, and they can also form aerial nests. So the signs of infestation for subterranean termites can be more difficult to find. Now keep in mind that, again, they are a very cryptic species. They like to be under the soil surface. But to even complicate that a little bit more, you can have multiple satellite nests and food resources that are connected by these underground tunnels and gallery systems. So even if you notice, termites feeding on a tree in your front yard, you still have to be very careful because they could be moving towards your house next. Okay, so they're never going to stop foraging. So some signs of infestations that we tend to look for is we have, of course, these mud tubes and swarm structures. So subterranean termites will create these shelter tubes to protect them against drying out, to protect against predators when they have to forage above the soil surface. So these are still soft-bodied insects. They're pretty fragile, and they like to stay hidden and keep themselves protected by building these mud tubes. Another sign of infestation are lots of termite wings. So we get phone calls around this time of year, every year, saying, well, I have a few termites in my home, a few swarmers. Do I need to worry about it? So a sign of infestation, I always tell people, is you're looking for thousands of wings or thousands of alates that are coming out of a wall inside of your home, something like that. But Formosan termites do swarm at night from May to July. So we are just on the cusp of the swarm season here. You also need to be notice some trees around your home. So if a tree is infested around your home, you may see mud tubes on tree bark. Sometimes you do have to dig a little bit. Here we have a picture of somebody finding termites along the base of a tree. And it's really important to include trees in inspections as well, because after a period of time with termites feeding on the center of that tree, if it goes unnoticed and untreated, we do get some pretty strong storm winds here in Louisiana, and that can cause some pretty hefty damage. So there are several products that are on the market that are available for monitoring. So these are not treatment methods, but these are ways that people can monitor for termites around their own home, especially in areas with very high termite pressure. So this here is a picture of the advanced system from BASF. It has inspection cartridges within it. So these stations are placed in the soil around the home's perimeter, where the top of the station would be flush with the soil, and then the rest of this part would be under the soil surface. So these are opened up on a regular basis, could be monthly, could be quarterly, and then you check them for the presence of live termites. And the idea here is if you find live termites in them, then you know that you need to call a pest control company. So here is another very similar system from Corteva. This is the HexPro system with monitors. Again, you would place these around your home's perimeter. You would open them up periodically. Termites are going to locate these monitors through their natural tendency to forage. So if they're in the area, there's a very high chance of them finding these monitors. And then once you see live termites in these monitors, then you can call your pest control company. And then here's just another example, the same concept here. This is FMC's product. This is the first line monitoring system. And the same concept here where they're around a home and checked periodically for live termites. However, we can also go the least expensive route. This is just a wooden stake purchased from a big box store or a local hardware store. They serve the same purpose. They can be hammered right into the soil and just pulled up from the ground to monitor for live termites. So if you pull that up from the ground, you know that termites are in the area, and you know that that would be the time to contact your local pest control company. Okay, and at this point, I'm going to pass the torch over to Ed Freitag, who is going to talk a lot more about WDIRs and inspections.
Okay, well, thank you. Glad to see everybody paying attention. Well, I really can't see you there, but I'm assuming they're all paying attention. So let's talk about WDIR. So that stands for Wood Destroying Insect Report. So this WDIR inspection is just for the structural integrity of the home. So it only covers termites and powder post beetles. Doesn't cover cockroaches and rats and other pests. So the reason for this annual inspection is well, it has to be conducted by a registered technician to look for signs of termites, moisture, anything that attracts wood destroying insects like termites, and the activity like droppings. Carrie talked about the droppings from the drywoods, discarded wings like when they swarm, and also tunneling from insects, rodents, and other pests. So there's a difference here between WDIR and what we call an annual inspection, because an annual inspection, you're going to be doing more than just termites. Okay, so a WDIR can only be conducted and written by a structural pest control technician that has successfully passed a WDIR exam administered by the Louisiana Department of Agriculture, LDAF. Additionally, this technician must attend a WDIR training course offered by the Louisiana Pest Management Association. So if you don't have these qualifications and somebody comes to your house to do an inspection, you should ask for that, because otherwise this person is not qualified and he shouldn't be doing this. On the other hand, an annual inspection can be conducted by a structural pest control technician that has successfully passed the LDAF exams. So this is very different than WDIR, because WDIR, you have to pay for that. It's usually used for transactions when you're buying a house or you're selling a house. Where an annual inspection is typically to check for to see you don't have termites or other pests in the house. Very clear distinction there. So although you're probably not going to be able to read this, this is kind of the paperwork that goes on in WDIR. You have to have company information, homeowners information, inspection findings, and it has to be pretty thorough, and then clauses and signatures. So clauses mean things like the garage, maybe you don't want to have the garage protected, so they take that out of the contract. So it's you know, so that, again, you have to be trained to do this properly. Okay, so WDIR is typically requested whether you're buying, selling, or refinancing your home to provide evidence of possible infestation by wood-destroying organisms or damage caused that is visible and accessible at the time of the inspection. Because a lending company wants to know that they're giving you the money for something that is not going to fall apart within a short period of time. Again, that's what the WDIR is for. On the other hand, the annual inspection is offered by a pest control company to determine if the treatments are controlling the pests or if new pests are present. Sometimes maybe you just built a new house, it's only a year old. You may want to have an inspection just to see if there's anything happening with your house. Okay, so I put this Blondie comic strip in here because one of the things that is aggravating is that you do an inspection in a house and you don't find anything. And so what do you tell a homeowner? That is your house completely free of pests? Well, you really can't do that, but you can say that at the time of the inspection, there were no visible issues, no pest or no damage. So there's usually some kind of pest or some kind of issue. It's just sometimes you can't see it, even in new construction. So here's a typical house here in Louisiana, and this is what it looks like from the outside. And what you don't know is what's on the inside of the walls, what's underneath, under the slab, what's in the ground, what's in the trees. So the question is, okay, so how long should an inspection take? Well, it depends on a lot of factors. So if you have a 1,200 square foot house, it's going to take a lot less than, let's say, a 4,000 square foot house that's 2 stories. Also, type of construction. Is it on a slab? Is it elevated? Does it have a lot of different types of construction that make it more difficult. How much furniture do you have inside the house? Because we got to do the inspection indoors and outdoors. And a lot of times you can't see most of the walls because there's too much furniture. Do you have pets? I have been bitten by pests before. So even though the dog was friendly, it still bit me. And, you know, sometimes those things can be a problem. Do you have crawl space? Do you have attics? How many attics do you have? Do you have crawl spaces that are very, very small or very narrow? Or do you have those that are released to get in there? Do you have a lot of trash underneath the crawl space? The amount of damage or conducive conditions, and we'll talk about these conducive conditions later. Landscaping. Some homes don't have any landscaping. Some homes have so much landscaping you think you're in the tropics, right? And you can't reach the slab or the walls on the outside. And it also depends how thorough the inspector is going to be in that inspection. Is it going to take him half an hour just to get to the next inspection? It's going to take him 1 hour and a half to make sure he doesn't miss. So lots of variables. So what is a good termite inspection then? Well, a very thorough termite inspector will show a lot of the information on the report, which should include pictures of any damage or conducive conditions or pest evidence. All areas of the structure should be covered, including the exterior of the structure. So unless there is no way to get to certain places, you should cover everything. But in some cases, you have to write what's called a waiver. It means that there was no way to reach that area. Maybe there's a door that nobody has the key for the lock, or maybe it's an area that a lot of vegetation has covered it and you can't see anything. So it all depends. So when I do my termite inspections, I tend to do a lot of narrative. That means I write a lot of what I've seen in the field or inside. I like to put a picture of the structure, either from Google or from the front. That way, when I go back to my inspection reports, I can remember what the structure looked like and where the problems were. So I tend to be very thorough. I tend to put, I don't use opinions on these things because an opinion doesn't tell you anything about the structure. So you have to only write down what you see. So lots of pictures. I'll take pictures of areas that have termites or termite damage where the mud tubes are. You can see on the bottom left right here, that is almost impossible to inspect. There's so much stuff in there, and the same here on the right. So there was a closet or a place to store materials, and I mean, you could see that there was damage on the outside, but doing the interior inspection was almost impossible. Here's another warehouse in here in New Orleans that they had severe Formosan termites damage. And they actually made this is what's called an aerial nest. So they're living in this place. They had plenty of moisture, even though you can see that the walls are cinder block. They had plenty of wood, and they actually came in from cracks in the slab. And then I found all kinds of damage, so I put pictures, and all that goes into the report. And also draw a map. A lot of times it's just handwritten map, sometimes not exactly to scale, but it just gives me a good reference as to what I found, where the damage was, where I found moisture, where I found conducive conditions, where the treatments were done, et cetera, et cetera. So what's the inspector look like when he shows up to your house? Probably not in that suit and tie and nice shoes, because that means he's not going to do an inspection. So I bring my Tyvek suit or a cloth suit. I have at least 2 flashlights. I protect myself by either wearing a hat, sometimes hard hat if there's a lot of nails under the crawl space. I take a backpack with all my tools. I'll wear gloves. I wear knee pads and shoes that are not bulletproof, but that I won't get injured my feet. And it's hard work. It's going to hurt your back at the end of the day when you do these inspections, but you got to do what it takes to do it right. So what am I looking for when I do an inspection or a termite inspection? Obviously, live termites, you can find them, and that's usually not the case. Very rarely do we find live termites. Look for termite parts. Remember, we talked about wings. We can use wings to identify what kind of termite. We can also use the head if we just find heads from soldiers. Termite trails, damage, and we can tell whether it's what kind of insect caused that damage, and Carrie, we talked about it later. Conducive conditions, moisture issues, and construction issues. You'd be surprised how many of these problems are actually caused by constructing a house in a certain way. So where do they come from then? Well, there's at least several ways they can come in. They can come in during the swarm season because they fly and they're looking for places to establish a new colony. So they might land on your roof, and if you have moisture up in the roof, they might set up shop in there. But typically, like Carrie mentioned, they're foraging, they find a tree next to the house, and with the tree, they find a pile of wood next to your house, and eventually they find your house. That's just a tree to them, it's wood. So as long as you got the right conditions, they'll start infesting feeding on your house. And the problem is they're cryptic. That means they're hard to find. They're usually not very obvious, especially if you have vegetation or if you have a house that is on a slab. So here's a house that it went on for a long time, lots of damage in there. They pulled the wall out, and that's what you may expect after it has been neglected for a long time. Maybe these folks didn't have a contract for a long time, and then maybe one day the door just kind of fell off, and then they said, "Oh, they got a problem here." They call maybe they call a carpenter, and they open it up, and now you have to deal with termites. So yeah, you don't want to wait till it gets to this point. So is there a guarantee that just because you do a termite inspection, there are no termites? No, I mean, it's kind of a toss-up, right? So an inspector maybe he didn't find termites at the time of the inspection. Maybe the termites weren't active that day. Maybe they were in a different location, but they may still be present somewhere in the structure. You just couldn't see them. So it's also possible that termites may invade the property the next day, right? They might just come in the next day and you weren't there at the right time. So there's no guarantee on a termite inspection. The only guarantee is that you hope that they did a really thorough job and that they will find something. So I'm going to let Carrie talk about identifying wood damage now, because there's all different kinds of things, not just termites.
Yes, and it's, again, just like it is important to properly identify a live pest, it is also very important to be able to tell, what made this type of damage on wood, right? Because if you can identify what pest has been there by the damage that you find on the wood, different pests are treated differently, right? It's also very important to be able to tell the difference in how these species damage wood, because it could be something that you would put on an inspection report as well. So of course, it's easiest to identify a pest if you have a live specimen or even a dead specimen from the wood itself, but that's not always possible. So sometimes the damage is characteristic of the pest. So subterranean termites, when they damage wood, they will feed along the grain of the wood. You may find soil present within the damaged wood as well, as you can see here. That was all soil that was brought in by foraging termites. Formosan termites also build carton nest out of this material that's made out of soil, wood, their saliva, and their frass as well. Damage caused by drywood termites looks much different than that of subterranean termite. Instead of feeding along the grain of the wood, they will actually feed across the grain of the wood. So this will produce a very sandpapered appearance of the wood. It almost looks like a piece of art, in my opinion. Very smooth sandpapered finish to it. And you will see a lot of galleries within this wood that are filled with frass. Remember, we talked about how they will fill their galleries up with frass, and then when it's time for them to clean house, they will create a kick-out hole and push a lot of that frass out of their nest. Okay, so powder post beetles, you certainly don't want to mistake these for termite damage. So true powder post beetles fall in the family Lictidae. So this family will infest hardwoods, and the way that they damage wood is the females will lay their eggs in pores within the wood. The larvae hatch out of the eggs and they will tunnel through the wood, which causes the damage. And then once the adults emerge from that wood, there will be a little pinhole within that wood, many times surrounded by this very powdery frass that you can see in that picture. And then we have false powder post beetles in the family Bostricidae. So they do look a bit different. They will infest hardwoods and softwoods. A bit different in appearance. The adults will have a very rough thorax. They're very commonly found in things like picture frames and furnitures, maybe some paneling. And the exit holes are slightly different in size as well. So death watch and furniture beetles. So this is the family Anobiidae. This family will infest seasoned wood. They will prefer damp areas with very high humidity. The females will lay their eggs on rough surfaces. And again, it's the larvae that once they hatch, they will create the wood damage. The emergence holes are pretty small, up to only 3 millimeters in diameter, and their frass is very gritty. So we have round-headed wood borers, which can cause, these very large galleries in wood. And it looks like really extensive damage. However, they are found in living trees and recently cut logs. So if you're burning firewood, you may find this type of gallery in the firewood that you're burning. The adults will emerge as these longhorn beetles right here. So that can be pretty noticeable if you see that emerging from your firewood, right? Then we have flat-headed wood borers. So these are the metallic wood boring beetles in the family Buprestidae. So they're not often found infesting wood and structures. They produce a very stringy frass, very much like the round-headed wood borers. The larvae will make these pretty large galleries within wood. Then we have ambrosia beetles and bark beetles. So these are primarily found in firewood. If you peel the bark off of your firewood and you see patterns like this that kind of radiate out from kind of a central groove, that is from the ambrosia beetle. Okay, so it's a very characteristic pattern found just below the bark surface, and they will feed on ambrosia fungi, which actually causes the staining of the wood that you can see in this picture right here. Carpenter bees also make very distinctive damage to wood. So these are solitary bees. They're similar to bumblebees, but they have a shiny black abdomen. What they will do is they will carve out an area of wood about the size of your pinky, and that is where they will lay their eggs, and then they will provision these eggs with pollen. Okay, so that is why a lot of times you will see kind of a yellow staining below the hole. That is pollen. Carpenter ants. So these can be really large ants. They do look a little bit menacing. They can be pretty large. They do vary in color. Their galleries, so their galleries can be very smooth and sandpapered, much like what we saw with the Drywood termites. However, instead of being filled with that very characteristic frass that we saw with the Drywood termites, you may see things like dead insect fragments and some very coarse sawdust. So that is the main difference there that you would see. Carpenter ants do prefer moist wood. However, they're not actually eating the wood. So they are just creating their galleries within the wood, which also causes damage, but they're not feeding on it. And sometimes we get damaged wood from not having any insects at all. Okay, so again, it's important to be able to tell the difference between like brown rot and insect damage. So with brown rot, the wood will break apart. It's very crumbly. It's brittle. Damage can be pretty extensive. It's the most common cause of decay in structures. So again, it's very important to be able to tell the difference between which pest causes these characteristic types of damage. Okay, so I'm going to let Ed talk about inspection tools and inspection devices.
Okay, thank you. So what kind of tools does an inspector need to look for termites? Well, obviously coveralls if you're going to go up an attic, or if you're going to go under the house and do the crawl space. Flashlights, I'll carry at least 2. A screwdriver, something similar to poke around in the wood. A hammer or something like that to poke around in the wood and make sounds. Sometimes it sounds hollow because it's got damage. A ladder. And I stress this so much that you can't go to a house and say, oh, I can't go up an attic because I forgot my ladder. That's just not an excuse. You have to have the equipment. You have to be prepared. You have pencil, clipboard, and graph paper to make your maps, measuring tape or electronic measuring, and collecting containers. I always suggest collecting some of the samples in case you don't know the difference between a Drywood and a Formosan or a Subterranean. So you can bring them to our office here, and we can identify them for you, free of charge. Okay, so we decided that just doing inspections by looking wasn't enough for us. We needed to be a little more scientific about it. So we spent a lot of time testing different equipment. So now we use what's called an infrared camera or a thermal imager, moisture meters, an acoustic detection device with which basically it's actually microwave and can detect insects that are actually, an acoustic detection device is something that takes the sound that the insects make. We don't use that too much. It's not as accurate. A flexible fiber optic borescope, so when you drill holes in the wood and actually see the termites or see the damage. A microwave motion detector is kind of like the radar in your car detects movement. And a decay detection device, also called a resistograph. And I'll show you a picture of that. But again, we're not trying to sell anything here or any brand. We're just trying to show you that it's different equipment that you can use. A termite inspection. I'm not doing actually a WDIR. I'm not doing this because somebody's selling or buying a house. They just want to know whether there's termites, or if they do have termites, why the treatments haven't worked, and they want to have more information as to where they're coming from. So I spend a lot of time talking to the homeowner, or the manager, or the tenant. I walk around at the outside of the building and do an visual inspection of all the areas, definitely look at trees. I scan the walls, the floors, ceilings, etc., with the infrared camera, and look for what's called anomalies. And I'll show you some pictures of that, things that just don't look right. Then we test the anomalies with moisture meters, followed by a pest finder, which determines whether there's live insects in there. And then we may drill access holes. If the homeowner gives us permission, we can look inside and say, oh, these are roaches, or these are ants, or these are termites. And then collect samples, put them in 100% alcohol, map the damage and active areas, and then write the report. So very, very similar to WDIR, but we don't do WDIRs because that is completely different than just looking for termites. So just to give a little information how infrared cameras work. So basically, I just detect heat. They just detect temperature. So there's 3 ways that they can do that. The energy or the heat that is emitted from the object, like a candle. Candle produces heat, or a light bulb. The energy that is reflected of an object, like when the sun hits the wall. So the heat is going to be on the wall, but it's come from the sun. And then energy that comes from an object behind the wall. So it could be maybe somebody's got a light bulb on the other side of the wall, and the camera's going to see a big hot spot in there. So basically, your camera sees all 3 at the same time. And when you're doing inspections, you have to sort of figure out what's going on. And that's what makes this kind of difficult to use. You can buy an infrared camera, but it doesn't give you instruction on how to find termites. So here's a picture of an actually pretty inexpensive camera. It's a FLIR 1. It's about $250. And you can see on that wall that I can see the actual metal studs. This happened to be metal studs. So you just see in the temperature from the studs transmitted to the surface of the sheetrock. So you're not really doing x-rays in any sense. You're just looking at the temperature that's transmitted through. Here is some moisture on the crawl space on the first floor. It's kind of a crawl space that the homeowner didn't even know they had this leak under their dishwasher. So these are the kinds of things that termites are looking for. They're looking for these moisture areas, and it was dripping so slow that you couldn't see any staining on the sheetrock on the ceiling. But the camera only sees gray colors, 256 shades of gray, but you can computerize or enhance the colors so it's easier for you to see the hot parts and the cold parts and be able to see that there's something wrong in there. Now, there's a lot of houses that are being built with synthetic stucco, and it's called EIFS, exterior insulating foam system. And the problem with this is that sometimes the infrared camera can't see anything because the cold to penetrate. So a lot of times you really don't see much. It's just gray. But in this case, this house had a lot of water leaks from the windows, and you can see on the right corner back here, that's what what you see with your normal eyes. Then here's what the camera sees with gray, and these is with the enhanced colors. So you can see there's a lot of moisture in this area, and we know it's moisture because we use the moisture meter is way up in 20% or more. So we can actually use the infrared camera on the outside too, and you can see different structures, moisture problems, a lot of times electrical issues. You can see hot wires, you can see plumbing, but we have to determine what those anomalies mean. And a lot of times, well, the moisture meter will tell you it's anything over 9 or 10%, it's too high. So there's probably a leak somewhere in there. At the same time, what if we see something there, but we don't know what insect is causing it, right? There's movement in there. So we'll drill a hole, use one of these endoscopes, and you can buy a $30,000 one like the one that I'm holding, or you can buy one from Amazon that doesn't do quite the same job, but you can still look inside the wall and be able to determine what's in there. So here we are looking at a tree. This tree happened to have termites, or at least we thought it did. We drilled some holes in it and looked inside with a borescope, and we found that obviously there was a lot of termites in there. That's where the building was being, they were going from the tree to the building. This acoustic device, it's actually pretty neat because it has 3 tools in one. It detects the temperature, the moisture, and also it detects motion. So it's called the Termite. It's a very expensive unit. It's $5,000, but it's one of the few units that can actually detect termites in synthetic stucco or EIFS, and also in the foam when they put foam inside between the studs. This is the only unit that actually worked. It was actually tested for that, and I was involved in that test. And then, of course, if you have timbers like they do in a lot of the old structures at warehouses, it's very expensive to replace these timbers. And so you need to know whether they're damaged or not. So we use a resistor graph. And the way this instrument works is that it has a very fine, almost like a drill bit, and it spins at a very high rate. And for every revolution, it measures how much it penetrates in the wood. So you can see on the top here that a piece of wood was solid all the way. But this one here, when we penetrated with it, you can see in the middle, there's no wood, and it reflects this section right here, and then it go into the other side. So you can do a lot of detection in wood without having to do a lot of damage to the wood because it's a very, very small diameter drill. It's not going down. Huh. There we go. I was having trouble with my mouse. And I'm going to let, I think I know I'm doing conducive conditions. So what is a conducive condition then? Well, it's a condition that makes the home or structure more likely for termite attack. And the biggest issues are wood and wood issues that cause the termites to infest a house. So some examples: condensation from AC systems. So that's providing moisture to the termites. water leaks of any kind, whether it's from the roof to the windows, on pipes, on tubs, on faucets, toilets, etc., etc. Water leaks are bad. Planters and attached decks that don't allow you to see the slab, and so you can't make inspections because you can't see the trails. Downspouts that are pouring water into the house, or incorrect grade slopes, so the water is returning back to the house instead of away from the house. Stucco and siding below grade. That means that you can't see the trails because they're below ground. Mulch too close to the foundation. Landscaping that's too close to the walls. Expansion joints, coal seams. And there's probably about 100 more things that I could talk about, but this is just going to give you the ones that are most common. So what about this? Doesn't it look beautiful? Well, termites think it's really beautiful too. So the roaches and ants and rats, because they got cover. So even though it looks nice, you're really helping the pest by giving them a place to hide. So there's no way that I can own this house and be able to inspect for termites. I would have to cut it all down. So yeah, so that's a very bad conducive condition. How about this in the French Quarter? An abandoned building that it's just like growing vegetation because of all the moisture in there. So what do the neighbors think about this thing? Well, it's a really bad conducive condition that you really need to take care of. Here's one in the French Quarter in the Pontalba Apartments where they had a leaky tray from the air conditioner. So the water was leaking back into the wall, and they had thermals termites inside the wall because they had water there. And when you see buccal floors like this and you don't have a leak anywhere, that means that termites are bringing the moisture, because when they feed on wood, it's actually easier for them to feed on it when it's moist. So they can bring the moisture themselves, and that moisture will buckle these floors, and is very, very common when you have a termite infestation, especially for most of termites. Yeah, we had a problem with the roof in here. The water canals were blocked off with leaves, so the water was, every time it rained, it went back into the eaves, and they were trying to control termites here, but you have to control these water conditions, these conducive conditions first, before you try to control termites. Here, this is in a warehouse, in a closet. Nobody had been in that closet, and they were complaining that they were swarming. Well, the termites, they come in through the penetrations where you have water pipes or electrical pipes, because there's always going to be a slight gap in the concrete because it shrinks over time. And these are all trails in here going to different places, and they were feeding on the wood. These are really something that aggravates me a lot. Why do they leave these stakes and then pour concrete over it? This is going to crack right here, and they're probably going to pour or construct a wall right on top of this. That means that over time, the termite's going to find the stake, just like a monitor that you put outside your house. There's going to be a crack here, and you'll never know until that wall gets this weak, and you know you have termites. So yeah, these form stakes like they need to go. Mulch. What about mulch? Well, there was a lot of debate about mulch. It can be a problem with termites, but if you leave a gap like this, then you are not covering, especially if you have a liquid treatment, you are not creating a bridge for them if you leave a gap with rocks. But if you cover all that treated soil, you're basically bridging that treatment zone, and they can't get into the house that way. And of course, stucco covering over brick. That's really not a good idea, because you're leaving underneath, and termites can go in there. And then of course, if you have moisture in there like you have in here, then you're creating double conducive conditions. Okay, here's one that is a real nightmare for us, because I cannot inspect through this foam. The infrared camera can't see it. It's basically just gray, and I'll show you a picture of that. And so you have what we called open cell and then closed cell. One has more insulation value than the other one. That's basically polystyrene foam. It's great insulating system, but the industry needs to think about what the termite inspectors are facing. And I know at least in Georgia, they started doing some changes to what the inspector can do. They can cut some of the foam just to do the inspection. And so this is what we're faced with. This is up in an attic. So it looks nice and pretty. You're up in an attic and it's very comfortable. It's not hot because the air conditioned there. But there were termites in here, and the infrared camera on here only sees gray. So the problem is if you go in there with a knife and start cutting it all out, you're going to void the warranty, right? So we can't do that. But yet we know there were termites in there. So you're kind of like between a rock and a hard place. How do you know there's termites in there unless you can open them up, right? So I love the fact that it's great insulating material, but there's got to be a place for us to be able to inspect, and hopefully that'll change. This is what's called EIFS, or synthetic stucco, exterior insulating and finish system. So the way this is formed, so you have like a regular wall, you have the sheething, which is wood, and then you have a lot of materials in there that are that prevent water from going through, and then the water goes down. Then you have foam, then you have some more fiberglass, and then you have a covering that is waterproof. The problem is when a rock hits this and pokes a hole in it, moisture gets in there and never comes out. It's like a sponge on your sink that it never dries out. So that can become a conducive condition. And also not just for pests, but for the brown rot, because these studs, these wood portions here, they can't handle that moisture all the time and becomes, so it starts rotting. This is at EIFS, or synthetic stucco, that the termite, this was put over brick, and the termites just loved it. They can take that foam and chew it up and make carton nests with it. They don't eat it, but they actually use it for carton nests. So, unfortunately, that's what happens with that kind of thing. And you're going to take over?
Yes,
Okay,
yes,
great.
we're going to finish this up. So you may be wondering at this point, now that you know all about conducive conditions, what can you do around your own home to help eliminate some of these conditions that are so conducive for termite infestations? Well, first and foremost, you want to mitigate your moisture problem. So Ed, you talked a lot about this. And so termites do need moisture. So if you can mitigate any kind of things like roof leaks, or the grade of your lawn, make sure that water is moving away from your home. That can take care of a lot of problems. You also want to make sure that vegetation around your home is not growing too close to the structure. Okay. You also want to eliminate any wood to ground contact. So please do not store your firewood on the surface of your lawn right up next to your house. If your home is on a slab foundation, you always want to make sure that your slab is visible all the way around your home. This makes it so much easier to locate mud tubes if they do pop up here and there. If there are termites in the area and they are building a mud tube on your slab, you want to make sure that you can see that and find it quickly, right? Again, wood to ground contact, avoid storing firewood next to your home. So let's just say that you've eliminated as many conducive conditions as you can. You have a termite inspection on your home, or you have monitors around your home, and you find termites. Oh, so what I don't want anybody to do is I don't want anybody to panic. Okay. Our suggestion is always contact a pest control professional licensed in structural pest control. And really, this is the most difficult thing to do, but please do not physically remove any mud tubes or try to clean where termites have been hiding. So if you know where termites are in your home, let the professionals handle that. You don't want to clean off mud tubes. It's going to chase them somewhere else, and you don't want to spray anything. Don't try to treat it yourself. Okay, and that's one of the hardest things that people have to do when they first find out that they have termites. Okay, because what it's going to do is it's actually going to chase termites somewhere else where you don't know where they are and you can't observe them directly. Okay, but I do appreciate everybody's time and attention today. I do hope that you join us in another 2 weeks. Okay, we're going to be doing part 3, all about termite treatment. So we're going to be getting into the nitty-gritty of liquid treatments and fumigation and bait stations, and we'll even be talking about physical barriers as well. And then part 4, 4 weeks from now, we're going to learn how trees are protected against Formosan subterranean termites. So again, thank you everybody for your time and attention. And I believe, Astacia, if there are questions in the chat, we can certainly address those.
Yes, I see a question. I keep seeing wood strips in new sidewalk joints, maybe cedar or pressure treated. Isn't that termite food? I see it everywhere.
Oh, within joints and concrete?
Yeah.
It just
Yeah,
says
it's
in
kind of
wood strips
like
in
the
new
concrete.
sidewalk joints.
Yeah, if they're treated, if it's treated wood, then it won't be a problem because the termites aren't going to eat it if it's got the proper treatment on it. Yeah, it's a lot of sidewalks or the driveways have those joints where they put that wood, but that wood is treated. So very rarely does that get attacked. I mean, that wood will be there for the next 15, 20 years.
Okay, that's the only question I see in the chat so far. I don't see anyone, can't tell if anyone is typing right now, but I think that's all the questions we have. I just want to remind everyone, like Dr. Catone said, on Thursday, May 5th, we'll be back with our third installment, which is all about termite control and preventative measures, barrier treatments, baiting systems, fumigation, and the importance of a termite contract. You can follow us on social media at NOLA.gov. And once again, we're going to post this webinar on our YouTube and on our website. Thank you everyone for joining us today and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.